So the next model in the series of alternative models of market behavior and portfolio construction is behavioral portfolio theory. Now, when we say behavioral portfolio theory, this model is not the same as Markowitz portfolio theory. It's like quite different. The Markowitz portfolio theory is supposed to be the perfectly diversified portfolio. It says that the portfolio should be perfectly diversified portfolios, but here in behavioral portfolio theory, portfolio might look diversified, but they are not really perfectly diversified. They are not really the optimum portfolios. As optimum portfolio, when I say optimum portfolio, they are the portfolios of Markowitz portfolio theory. So they are not as optimum as Markowitz portfolio theory. So basically Markowitz portfolio theory looks at the overall portfolio return, overall portfolio variance, and the covariance of the assets. Basically, the covariance of the assets among themselves, which basically affects the risk analysis. So the assets are being chosen in a way, selected in a way that the covariance is minimum. That's the way they are chosen, so that the risk is reduced. In behavioral portfolio theory, what happens? The investors, they basically make the portfolio in layers. They make the portfolio in layers, and every layer represents one goal. So supposedly I have 4 goals to be achieved, and I put some money every month for these goals. The first goal is my fooding. Basically, I have to eat food, and for that food I need money. I have to allocate some money to buy that food, and that's the very important thing, we can say most important thing to do, because if I don't allocate money for that, I won't be able to eat food, and I need food to survive, right? At least I need food to survive. So I allocate some money. So fooding, I can say I allocate 10,000 for fooding. The second layer I can think of is maybe EMI, the EMI of my house. So if I don't pay the EMI, I'll be kicked out of my house. I don't want to kicked out of my house, so I have to pay EMI. I have to allocate some money to that layer, to that goal. But that is second to fooding. So fooding is most important, then EMI. So EMI, I allocate maybe 10,000 to EMI. Third is the school fees of my child. The school fees of my child may come as third priority. Again, I allocate 10,000 to that. I can still afford to maybe defer the school fee payment, but I cannot defer the EMI, and definitely I cannot defer the fooding. I cannot say that I'll eat food maybe after 1 month. I cannot say. I have to eat food now. I have to live now. Otherwise, I won't have any place to live. So these are the most important things, layers, you can say, goals, and then schooling. The fourth is maybe my aspiration to do a foreign tour. Now that this aspiration, this goal is least important. Even if I don't go for a foreign tour, it doesn't matter to my life, right? It's just you can say a luxury goal. So I allocate the some maybe 10,000 to that last least important layer, right? So now what I do, the money I allocated to the first layer, that's fooding, I invest that money in some security which is least risky, because I want to lose that money. If I lose that money, I won't be able to eat food. I won't be able to get money for food. So I invest that money in the least risky security. And sometimes people often don't invest that money at all. They keep the cash. They keep the cash to avoid risk, so that there's no risk of losing any money. But even that is not good, because again, keeping a lot of cash is not good. There should be some minimum cash, but should not be beyond the minimum cash requirement. So if there's a cash, I'm losing some interest. So keeping cash is not a good idea, but people do it. For the first layer at least, they do it. They keep cash to avoid risk. For the second layer, I'll probably invest in some security which can be more risky, bit more risky than the first layer, but will be much less risky than the third and fourth layers. So because I need to pay EMI, right? I need to pay EMI. I can still defer EMI, but I cannot defer my fooding. I can still defer EMI. So even I take some risk. So if I lose about 10%, I can still have 90%, I can maybe defer payment of 10%, or maybe I can manage 10% from somewhere and pay the EMI, and then pay the loan of 10% later. I can manage, means I can manage, right? So I can manage, right, to defer EMI for some time. So as I take some risk, but I cannot defer it for very long. So I take some risk. Third portion, at schooling, I take even more risk. I can take even more risk and invest that money to some security which is maybe more risky than the first or second layer. And the fourth is where I actually take risk, because that is something which is not something which will affect my life directly. So if I have allocated 10,000 to that, I can allocate that money to maybe derivatives trading, and if my luck goes good, I can earn a lot of money. I can triple my money, and I can maybe go to the world tour. And other way around, if I lose that money, that's fine, doesn't matter much, I won't go to the foreign tour. So that's how they allocate, and that's how they allocate the importance of the goals. And on the basis of importance of the goals, they invest money, they choose risk, they select risk levels of the securities. So for the first layer, definitely, since they take very less risk, so the return will be very less. And for the last layer, return can be very high, but again, risk is also very high. They can lose a lot of money as well. So that's how they make the portfolios. Now here they're considering the risks of the securities. Definitely, they're considering the risk of the securities, but on a standalone basis. They're not relating the risks of the securities to each other. Basically, they're not looking at the covariances of the securities. So a lot of time it happens that, okay, I take less risky security for the first layer, the most risky security for the last layer, but all the securities are from the same industry. That can happen. I can take debt from oil industry and allocate my money to that debt from oil industry from the first layer, and allocate the oil derivatives, allocate the money of the last layer to the oil derivatives, right? Which is, which is very risky, highly risky. So last layer, which is allocated to oil derivatives, becomes very risky, and the first layer, which is allocated to oil debt or some debt layer to oil industry, becomes least risky. I achieved what I wanted to do, but again I forgot that everything is being allocated to oil industry. So if I had considered the covariance here, I would not have done that, because same industry would have quite similar variance. I would have looked for some other industry as well. But here, since I didn't look for covariance, I did that mistake. The other mistake I can do is maybe allocating same kind of securities. So maybe I take investment grade debt and allocate the money of the first layer to investment grade debt. And for the last layer, I take a junk debt. I can earn a lot of money from junk debt. I can have least risk from the investment grade debt. But again, the fact remains the same, that I invested only in debt. Maybe I also the second and third layers are also, if they are also invested in debts only, again the risk of the second layer will be lesser than the first layer accordingly. As per the, I can say the A plus, I invested the money from the first layer in A plus debt, the money from the second layer in B plus debt, and accordingly I go down. But the fact remains same, all the investments are being done in debt, right? And same was for the oil industry as well. If I have done all the investment in oil industry for all the 4 layers, so again I forgot that all the investment in the same industry is not good. So when I was, it's basically when I was discussing about the first and second layer, that was an assumption that even second, third layers are also invested in oil industry. Maybe the first one is in debt related to oil, the second one is in the equity related to oil, third one is maybe some other equity, some maybe riskier equity, and the fourth one is oil derivatives. So just referring to that example. So all oil, all the layers are in oil. And the second example, all the layers are in debt. Again, the risk varies, but all the layers are in debt. These both situations are not good, because if we had taken covariance in our consideration, we would not have done this mistake. So these mistakes happen if we don't consider covariance, if we don't properly do the mean variance analysis, we don't properly take the portfolio variance as a whole, or maybe portfolio return as a whole. So these mistakes happen. So that's why, but people do it. This is basically something which people actually do it, which we call behavioral portfolio theory. This is a model which is practical, which is actually people do it. Nobody actually, when people usually invest, nobody gets the optimum level of diversification, the best level of diversification. Perfect diversification is never achieved. So that's something, an ideal situation. There may be cases where people do diversify if with the professional help, but most of the people do it on the layer basis. A lot of people do it on the basis of the behavior portfolio theory on the layer basis. They do their investment on the layer basis. Definitely exceptions are also always there. So there must be some group of people which is actually doing the proper Markowitz diversification. But still, that would also not be the best diversification, but that is something which is ideal, that best diversification. So, but still, they are basically moving towards that perfectly diversified portfolio. That small group maybe, but most of the people would do their investment on the basis of these layers, and these layers are basically notional. So they think in their mind, okay, that 10,000 is for food, I'll invest there. That 10,000 is for schooling, I'll invest in a maybe I can invest in more risky security. The last one, okay, that's for that amount is allocated to foreign trip. I can invest in derivative, oil derivative or some other derivative. So they keep they think in their mind. That's the notional. The layers are basically notional, and they do investments according to that. So that's behavioral portfolio theory. Thank you.